The image was clear, sharp, but something was there that didn't belong. It was as if heaven had signed the moment, hidden behind what the human eye could see. When Taylor Brooks zoomed in on the photo she had taken of her father in his hospital bed, she expected to find comfort, maybe one last memory to hold on to. But what appeared in the background was a number. 29 minutes and 11 seconds. It wasn't on any wall in the room. It wasn't part of the decor. It wasn't a reflection. It was some kind of inscription that only showed up in the photograph, like it had been written in light. And in that instant, something changed. Taylor's father had been in a coma. For days, the heart monitor kept its rhythm like a quiet whisper. Cold hands, dry lips, closed eyes. It was as if the soul had packed its bags, but hadn't yet left. In that hospital room, between the smell of alcohol and sacred silence, Taylor wasn't expecting miracles anymore. She just wanted time. She just wanted to understand. But as she looked closer at the image, something inside her whispered, "This isn't just a photo, it's a message." What if God still spoke through an image? What if heaven still had something to say, right when no one expects to hear it? What if a promise could be revealed in the background of a photograph? If you've ever felt like God was trying to speak to you through signs, write the name of someone who needs strength in the comments. Leave an amen if you believe nothing is a coincidence. And if this story touches your heart, subscribe now, because the next miracle might come in the form of a word, a psalm, or light. Taylor Brooks couldn't remember the last time her father smiled. In the past few months, his smile had surrendered to pain, to the exhaustion of treatments, to answers that never came. He had always been the kind of man who wore faith like armor, strong, quiet, one of those dads who didn't need to say "I love you," because the love was in the gestures, in his constant presence, in the voice that always said, "It's going to be okay," even when the world was falling apart. That morning, Taylor arrived early at the hospital. The light came in through the windows like it was asking for permission. Her father was there, just like always, lying still, breathing. With the help of machines, the beeping monitor marked the seconds like a cold metronome. Taylor approached slowly, took her phone from her pocket, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. She needed to hold on to this moment, even if it hurt, even if it felt like the end. She snapped the photo almost without thinking, a simple gesture, almost automatic, but something inside her grew heavy right after. Like that click had captured more than pixels, like it had recorded an invisible presence. She looked at the image on the phone screen, her father's pale eyes closed. In the background, the smooth hospital wall, but there, in the top corner of the photo, something caught her attention. A number, small, almost imperceptible, like a shadow or reflection of something that wasn't actually there. 29 minutes and 11 seconds. She frowned, zoomed in. The number was there, as if etched into the wall. But when she looked again at the actual room, nothing written on the wall, not on the curtain, not on any equipment. The number only existed in the photo. In that moment, something inside her trembled. Her father, who had been motionless for days, moved his finger ever so slightly. Nothing major, but enough to make Taylor hold her breath. Was it coincidence? A trick of light? A camera glitch? She stepped out of the room, breathing deeply, went into the hallway, sat on one of the metal chairs, looked at the image again. The number seemed even clearer now, as if it wanted to be seen. She remembered her father's old habit, underlining Bible verses with dates and numbers. God speaks to those who pay attention, he used to say. Taylor had never really believed it, but now, this felt like more than coincidence. She opened the browser on her phone and typed Bible verse 29 to 11. Several results came up, but one stood out, as if glowing among the rest. Psalm 29 to 11. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. She read it over and over. Strength, peace, words that seemed to float over the pain of that moment. Words that, somehow, were speaking directly to her, like an answer, or a warning, or a miracle. Taylor closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, a tear slid down her cheek without guilt, without resistance. She didn't know what to think. She only knew she had to go back. She had to look at her father again with different eyes. When she entered the room, something felt different. The air was lighter, the silence deeper. The monitor still beeped, but more calmly. Her father, though still unconscious, looked peaceful. Taylor stepped closer, took his hand, and whispered, "You showed me this, didn't you? You were the one who taught me to look for God between the lines, and now," he answered, with a photo. She stayed there, holding that cold hand, like someone holding a promise. Maybe it wouldn't be an instant healing. Maybe it wasn't the end of pain. But there was something in that morning, a quiet certainty that heaven was still near. In the minutes that followed, Taylor couldn't take her eyes off the image. The numbers seemed to glow brighter, as if each pixel was a condensed particle of faith, as if the photo wasn't just a memory but a sealed message. But who could have placed that there? Why did that number show up only in the photo? And why did her father move his finger at that exact moment? Taylor didn't have the answers, but she felt it deep inside. This was only the beginning. The true revelation hadn't come yet. At the doorway, a shadow passed quietly, a figure in white, with a badge hanging from the neck. Taylor turned to thank her, but no one was there. She walked into the hallway. No movement, no trace of anyone having passed by, just silence. And then, something unexpected on the floor. A Bible page, loose and crumpled, lying near the water fountain. Taylor knelt down, picked it up carefully. The page was torn along the edges, like it had been ripped out long ago, but still legible. At the top, it read, Book of Psalms. She swallowed hard. The number in the corner of the page wasn't 29. Not yet, but that moment was when everything began to shift. The paper in her hands was trembling, not from the cold but from what it represented. Taylor ran her fingers over the words, like someone caressing a memory. The loose Bible page felt old, its edges yellowed, worn by time. It was Psalm 19, another beautiful text, full of poetry and promise, but it wasn't 29. It wasn't the number from the photo. Still, she sensed this hadn't been left there by accident either. Someone or something was trying to say something. Back in the room, Taylor sat in the chair beside the bed her father slept, or rather, remained in the same stable, mysterious state as before. Not getting worse, not getting better, just there. A present body, but a soul hanging between two worlds. The room was cold. The air conditioner cycled on and off. The blue light from the monitor cast shadows on the walls. Taylor looked up at the ceiling fan. It was off. For a brief moment, she wished something would move. Anything. A sign that the invisible was still at work. And then, it happened. With no breeze, no one near the switch, the fan blades began to turn, slowly, as if pulled by an unseen thread. Taylor's eyes widened. She stepped back, looked around. No technician, no nurse. They were alone. Just her, her father, and that silent movement on the ceiling. Then something else came, barely a sound, a soft whisper, almost scratchy, like the blades were brushing against an ancient prayer. Along with the sound came a strange sensation down her spine, a memory, something distant. As a child, Taylor had been afraid of the dark. On stormy nights, she'd run into her parents' room, and her father, always patient, would calm her fears with prayer. He would scoop her into his arms and say, God speaks even through the wind. You just have to listen. That echoed inside her, strong, almost like an answer. The fan kept turning slowly, the bedside lamp flickering. Taylor stood, looked up to the ceiling like someone speaking to a sanctuary, and whispered, If this is God, I'm listening. But nothing responded. At least, not yet. As she turned back to her chair, she noticed something on the wall. A small shadow, but distinct. As if something was projecting a letter, a line, a dark mark on the pale paint. And again, she saw it. 29 minutes and 11 seconds. Just for a second, and then, it disappeared. Taylor dropped to her knees. Not out of faith, out of fear, out of exhaustion, out of confusion. She didn't know if she was losing her mind, if the pain was creating hallucinations, or if there truly was a message, repeating itself in different forms, trying to be understood. She felt the weight of the floor, the absence of answers, and she wept. But in the middle of the tears, a question was born, one she had never asked before. What if it's real? Not as a metaphor, not as comfort, but real. What if God is actually trying to speak to me? Taylor spent the rest of the afternoon in silence. She didn't leave the room, didn't touch her phone, just sat there, watching her father, waiting for any new movement, any new sign. But nothing happened. The fan stopped, the light steadied, and the peace that came after wasn't the absence of disturbance, it was the presence of something she couldn't name. That night, she fell asleep in the chair, her head tilted to the side. She dreamed of childhood, of her father reading the Bible out loud, of a mother lighting scented candles on Sunday nights, of the smell of clean sheets and unspoken promises. And in the middle of the dream, she heard something. A voice, not from someone but from within. Just one sentence. "You need to look deeper." She woke up with her heart pounding. The room still dark. Her father still there. But the dream had left a trail. Taylor grabbed her phone, opened the photo again, zoomed in on the number. It was still there. But now, it looked like there was more. On the side of the image, a shadow appeared one she hadn't noticed before. Something that looked like letters, almost unreadable. But there, something like grace. She didn't know if it was her imagination, or if it had always been there, but she locked it into memory. She left the room, needed air, needed answers. She walked to the nurse's station, her voice trembling. "Is there a nurse named Grace working here?" The woman behind the desk frowned, checked the screen, shook her head. "No, we don't have anyone named Grace on the schedule. Not tonight, not this week." Why, Taylor didn't know how to respond. She just nodded, confused, and walked back to the hallway. The name felt like a clue, as if something or someone was using symbols, photos, and memories to lead her toward a deeper revelation. And then, again, on the floor, there was something, a small piece of paper, like the torn page of an old notebook, handwritten. Just one sentence. "Look closer at the photo. What's behind it reveals more than you imagine." The handwriting was calm. The blue ink looked freshly dried, and somehow Taylor knew it wasn't a prank. She ran back to the room, her heart racing with urgency, sat down, opened the image again. This time, she didn't just zoom in. She rotated the phone, adjusted the brightness, tweaked the contrast, and then, they were hidden in shadows and contours. Something began to appear. A verse, not typed, not written, but projected, fragmented, in the reflection of the wall and the shadows cast from the ceiling, as if heaven itself had used light and angles to write something no one else could see. Taylor couldn't read the whole thing yet, but she saw the words forming, familiar words, ancient, sacred dot, and in that moment, she knew she wasn't alone. She didn't sleep again that night. She sat, motionless, watching her father's monitor like someone guarding the border between two worlds. The photo stayed open on her screen, and with each new glance, new shapes seemed to appear. It was like the photograph was revealing itself in layers, slowly, like a divine painting waiting to be deciphered. At 4:37 a.m., the silence of the hospital was broken by the soft sound of the door opening. Taylor looked up. A woman stepped into the room, wearing a white nurse's uniform, her hair tied in a low bun, her eyes tired but kind. She didn't say anything at first, just checked her father's vitals with slow, almost reverent movements. Taylor watched in silence, and then, before leaving, the woman turned to her and said gently, "You found it, didn't you?" Taylor swallowed hard. Found what? What's hidden? Sometimes God speaks like that. When we stop looking for answers, He starts showing us questions. And then she left, leaving only the echo of that sentence hanging in the air. The next morning, as sunlight filtered softly through the beige hospital curtain, Taylor searched for the woman. She walked down the hallway and approached the reception desk. "Hi, I wanted to ask. The nurse who came into my dad's room last night, tall, fair skin, low bun, really kind. Her name was Grace." The receptionist frowned again. "Ma'am, no one matching that description was working the night shift. Only Nurse Luke and Tech Angie were here overnight. Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" Taylor said nothing. She wanted to say yes, to explain how the woman touched her father's arm so gently, how she spoke with such wisdom, but something inside told her trying to explain it would only create more confusion. She walked slowly through the hospital. In the empty hallways, she smelled fresh coffee blending with the sterile scent of waxed floors. Every step echoed in her chest. As she turned the corner toward the pediatric wing, something caught her eye. On the bulletin board, among blood drive flyers and visiting hour notices, there was a plain white sheet of paper with a phrase written in soft blue letters: "Those who search only with their eyes miss what's seen by the soul." The note had no author, no signature, just that message, pinned up with thumbtacks, as if it had been placed there by accident. But lately, nothing felt accidental. Taylor snapped a photo, saved it to her phone. She was starting to piece things together. A nurse no one else had seen, a number that only appeared in a picture, scattered phrases in unlikely places. Was she becoming obsessed? Was the pain making her see patterns? But deep down, she knew the truth. A heart that's been touched by eternity knows when something is more than earthly. She returned to the room. Her father remained stable, and for the first time in weeks, she spoke to him as if he could really hear her. "Dad, a woman came here last night. She said I had found something, and maybe she's right. I just don't know what to do with it yet." Silence. "I wish you'd wake up. I wish I could hear your voice. Just once. Just to know what that number means to you." She held his hand, closed her eyes, and in her thoughts she began to pray. It wasn't a polished prayer, not filled with biblical phrasing, just a whisper, broken, human. "God, if you still speak, speak to me now, because I'm listening." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a notification. Taylor looked down, a text message from an unknown number. Just a link, nothing else. She hesitated, then clicked. The link led to a short video on a prayer platform. A pastor she had never seen before was speaking in a firm voice. "If you're seeing this video right now, it's because you need to know Psalm 29 is a key. It holds strength, it holds peace, and it also holds a warning. What looked like death is just the beginning of a new word of life." Taylor paused the video, her eyes filled with tears. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about her father. It was as if God was using every possible means to push her toward a specific point, a place where faith and logic intersected, where reasoning gave way, and mystery began. When she looked back at her father, she noticed something, a subtle twitch of his eyelid, and for the first time he whispered something. Taylor leaned in, anxious. "Dad, what did you say?" His voice was nearly inaudible. A breath, but she understood. It was always She knelt beside the bed, crying silently. This was no longer doubt, it was confirmation, but there was still something more, something that would tie it all together. In the corner of the room, light hit the dry erase board just right, and a diagonal reflection appeared, revealing a word, split in half. BLE. Taylor stood slowly, walked to the board, leaned in. What once looked like dirt now seemed like something more. Faint letters, faded markings. She ran her finger across it, and the full word emerged, :blessing. It was as if the hospital, the room, the surrounding objects, all had been prepared. As if the entire setting had been the stage for a personal revelation. As if someone had left a trail of breadcrumbs made of faith for her to follow. And that's when Taylor understood. The number, the page, the woman, the message, the word on the board. None of it was separate. It was all one message, but what it meant still wasn't complete. That morning, Taylor didn't speak to anyone. She just watched. The hospital moved around her in silence, doctors walking in and out, patients wheeled away for tests, families waiting with lowered heads. But inside her, it was loud. Her mind buzzed. Her heart echoed like a chamber. Something else was missing. She knew it. The number, the name, the note, the nurse, the reflection. None of it had been random. The question that pounded now was, where's the last piece? While her father slept, Taylor decided to take more photos of the room. A strange idea, but it had come out of nowhere, or maybe carried by the same breeze that once made the ceiling fan move on its own. She took 3, 4, 5 pictures of the same corner, the wall beside the IV stand, just below the auxiliary light. When she zoomed in on the last photo, she nearly dropped her phone. There it was again, 29:11. But this time, more than the number, there was something behind it. The shadows formed the silhouette of curved letters, like an entire phrase etched into the plaster. Taylor's eyes widened. She climbed onto the chair, steadied herself, and ran her hand along the wall. Nothing was visible, but as she touched it, she felt shallow grooves beneath the paint, indentations, as if someone had carved something there before the final coat was applied. Using her phone's flashlight, she angled the beam across the wall and the letters began to appear. A verse, incomplete, but clear enough to read. "The Lord gives strength." Taylor read it aloud. A shiver ran down her spine. The rest was faded, but the phrase, she knew it. She grabbed her phone, Bible, and typed it in. It appeared instantly. Psalm 29:11. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. She sat down, breathless. It was there, etched into the wall, hidden beneath layers of paint and renovations, missed by hundreds of eyes that had passed by but visible to anyone searching with the soul. And she had been searching. She closed her eyes, pressing the phone to her chest. It all made sense. Now, that was the psalm. That was the number. That was the answer. For a moment, she wanted to run, to shout, to tell someone. But something inside whispered, "Not yet." As if the revelation wasn't meant for the world, but for the heart. Like a sacred gift meant to be unwrapped in silence. She knelt on the floor, took a deep breath, and began to pray. But this time, it wasn't a prayer of pleading. It was a prayer of recognition. Lord, I found it. I found it. I don't understand everything yet. I still don't know why. But I found it. Just then, her father's monitor began to blink with a slight uptick in rhythm. Taylor jumped up, rushed to his side. His hand was moving. His eyelid trembled. Dad, Dad, it's me. Taylor, a faint moan escaped his lips. The first real sound since he had fallen into the coma. Taylor hit the call button. Nurses came running. The attending doctor arrived moments later. He's trying to come out of it, the doctor said. His body is responding. Taylor now held her father's hand with both of hers, her heart beating like a wild drum. As the team performed the first neurological tests, she whispered the psalm softly. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. And in that moment, for the first time, her father's eyes opened. Taylor, he murmured, voice raspy. She let out a sob. The whole world melted in her tearful gaze. She moved closer. It's me, Dad. I'm here. He looked at her, weak but aware. Alive. You found it, he said. Taylor nodded. Overcome. I found it. It was the psalm. It was 29. It was on the wall. It was everywhere. Her father closed his eyes briefly and let out a peaceful sigh. Then, with effort, he whispered, "That was the psalm I prayed every single day since you were born." Taylor froze. She had never known. He had never mentioned that verse before. But there it was, the answer. That inscription was old. It lived in him. Maybe it was a vow. Maybe it was a spiritual marker, left behind by years of silent prayer. She cradled his face in her hands. And now, it's come back to me, in a way I could finally understand. Because now, he said, eyes locked on hers, it's your turn to believe. Taylor couldn't hold back the tears. She embraced him gently, feeling his warmth again. For the first time in weeks, she felt life returning. And more than that, she felt that God's presence wasn't just comfort. It was language. It was a code, a design. The verse wasn't just in a book. It was carved into a wall, hidden in an image, echoing from the ceiling. And now, alive in her father's body, as the doctors recorded his vitals and the team slowly left the room. Taylor stayed seated still in a state of sacred awe. Her father, now more lucid, looked at her and whispered, "Faith, sometimes, is a lens. We only see when we learn to adjust the focus." She smiled. And then, something passed through her. The nurse's voice echoed in her mind, as if spoken just now. What's behind reveals more than you imagine. And Taylor knew the story wasn't over yet. The room felt different. It wasn't just her father being awake. It was the shift in atmosphere. What had once been a space filled with waiting and silence, now felt infused with something subtle, yet very real. Hope. Not the loud kind from motivational speeches, but the kind that walks in barefoot and sits beside your bed like an old friend. Taylor fluffed her father's pillow gently. He was still weak, his voice barely a whisper, his movements slow, but there was a light in his eyes she hadn't seen in a long time. Maybe she never had. He looked at her with tenderness, with the expression of someone who'd held a secret for years and had finally found the right moment to share it. "I started praying that psalm," he said between pauses, "the night you were born." Taylor squeezed his hand. "Why?" He took a deep breath. His eyes drifted toward the ceiling, as if rewinding an old film. "Your mother had complications during labor. The doctors were worried. They told me we might lose one of you. I went into the hospital chapel and opened the Bible at random. It was Psalm 29. I had never really noticed it before, but there it was, written that the Lord gives strength to his people and blesses them with peace." Taylor felt a lump in her throat, and it worked. It did. "You both made it. And that day, I made a vow. I told God that every time you needed strength, he would find you first." The words came like waves. They didn't crash, they embraced. And now it all made sense. The number, the reflection, the wall, the photo, everything was a response to that old vow. It wasn't coincidence, it was legacy. "And why didn't you ever tell me that?" Taylor asked, her voice cracking. "Because the strongest faith is the one you discover on your own. She leaned in and rested her forehead on his. They stayed silent for a few seconds. Then her father said, with effort, "Would you like to pray with me?" Taylor had never led a prayer. It had always been others, her father, her mother, pastors, people with more faith. But now, something stirred inside her. As if, after so many signs, faith had stopped being theory and had become life. She nodded. "Yes, I do." She held his hand in both of hers, took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and spoke. "Lord, I've never been good with words, but today I understand. I understand that you speak in ways we don't always expect, that you use shadow, light, walls, cameras, names, even silence. Thank you for showing me that the psalm wasn't just a number, it was a living promise. Thank you for giving him strength, and for giving me peace when I thought I had nothing left." Tears came without warning. Her father wept too. "And now, God, I pray with you, not just for him, but for me, because today, I believe, and if you're still listening, and I know you are, let Psalm 29 become a bridge. Let those who hear this prayer receive it too. Let strength come, let peace remain, and let your name be the last one remembered, when everything else seems forgotten." The room went silent again, but it was a different silence, a full silence, dense, full of something no machine could measure, full of faith. Taylor opened her eyes. Her father looked at her with tearful eyes and said, "That prayer, only you could have made it. Why? Because now it came from your heart, not mine." They smiled, and then something unexpected happened. One of the doctors entered the room with a surprised expression. "They just told me the patient in the next room had a sudden improvement. He was in critical condition, but he stabilized right after midnight. The weirdest part, he said he heard a prayer." Taylor looked at her father, then at the doctor. "We heard something coming from here," the doctor continued. "The team almost came to check, but something held us back. It felt like we weren't supposed to interrupt." She smiled, not understanding everything, but knowing enough. That prayer hadn't stayed within four walls. It had crossed the plaster. It had crossed time. It had crossed stories. She helped her father sit up, offered him water. The two of them sat there, side by side, like two children who had just discovered a secret. Taylor then opened her phone again. The photo was still there, the number visible, the verse read, but now, everything had changed. It was no longer a clue. It was a memory, and a mission. She posted the image in a church friends group chat. No caption, just the photo with the number 29 to 11 and a praying hands emoji. She waited in silence. In the following minutes, messages began to pour in. "Oh my God, that verse got me through the ICU. I really needed to read this today. I just sent this to my sister going through chemo. Thank you." Taylor watched the notifications like someone watching seeds being scattered to the wind. Each response was an echo of what she had lived, a sign that the miracle wasn't meant to stay with her. It was shareable. It was a chain. It was alive. And then, in that moment, Taylor realized that psalm wasn't just for her. It wasn't just for her father. It was for everyone who, at some point, needed strength. And all of this, was still spreading in the hospital corridor, as artificial lights gave way to the first rays of sunlight. Taylor realized something she hadn't fully grasped before. That photograph she had taken of her father no longer belonged to her alone. She had posted it in a private group, but in less than 30 minutes, it had already reached other corners, showing up in stories she didn't even know. A friend of her mother's had sent it to a prayer circle. A pastor from another city used it in his morning sermon. A woman from Texas wrote, in tears, "My son had a seizure last night. I was desperate. I opened the church group chat, and saw the photo. When I read the psalm, he stopped convulsing." Taylor read each message with a trembling heart, not out of pride, but out of reverence. This had nothing to do with her. It was about what the image carried, what the number revealed, what the verse released, and in that moment, she understood that promise was never meant to be kept. It was made to be multiplied. She went back to her father's room. He was sleeping peacefully, his breathing lighter, his face more serene, the promised peace now visible on his face. It was as if the psalm itself had settled there, silently, like a curtain of fresh wind on a stifling day. Taylor looked at the old camera resting in her backpack. It had belonged to her mother, the same one used in so many childhood photos, baptisms, graduations. For some reason, she had brought that object with her, as if sensing it would be necessary. She opened the leather case, took the camera out carefully, and for the first time in years, decided to use it. She took a new photo of her father now, awake, serene, hands clasped over his chest. She didn't know if she'd ever develop the image, but deep down, something told her that camera still had a purpose to fulfill. As she put the camera away, a detail caught her eye. On the lens cap, which she had never noticed closely before, there was a tiny inscription, engraved in matte metal, almost imperceptible, just numbers. 29.11. Taylor froze. Her breath caught. She ran her finger over the numbers to make sure she wasn't imagining it. But there they were, engraved, old, weathered by time. She ran to the maternity ward. She needed answers. An older employee recognized her. "You're Mr. Brooks' daughter, right? Your mother used to work here years ago." Taylor nodded. "My mum used this camera. It was hers." The woman smiled warmly. "Oh, I remember. A wonderful photographer. She always said she captured faith, that every image she made was a prayer in pixels. She showed me this camera once. Said she had those numbers engraved when you were born." Taylor's knees weakened. "Why?" "She said it was the verse her husband found on the day you were born, that it had become a kind of family promise, and then everything made sense. The number didn't appear out of nowhere in the photo. It had always been there, engraved, on the camera, in their faith, in the family's story. What happened in that hospital wasn't an isolated event, was a reunion with something that had always been rooted deep within." Taylor returned to the room with a warm heart. She looked at her sleeping father and whispered, "Mum knew, and so did you. I was the one who still had to discover it." She posted a new message in the church group. "This verse saved my dad. It saved me too. If you need strength or peace, read Psalm 29-11 out loud. And if you want, take a photo of yourself holding a word of faith. Let's turn this network into a mural of miracles." The response was instant. Photos began to pour in. People holding signs with words like healing, faith, hope. Some were in hospitals, others at home, others beside loved ones. But there was a common detail in every image. The number 29-11 written somewhere. What had begun as an isolated photo now became a movement. Taylor spent the morning collecting those images. Each one carried a piece of the same promise. It was as if the verse had found a new way to exist, not only in the pages of the Bible but in the eyes of each person who chose to believe. By the end of the day, a nurse entered her father's room to check his vitals. She smiled upon seeing Taylor still awake, still connected. "Did you know the woman in the next room woke up this morning?" Taylor turned, surprised. "Really?" "Yes. She'd been unconscious for days. No one expected a response. But today, she opened her eyes, said she had a dream about a prayer passing through the wall, that someone on the other side was speaking, about peace, that she kept hearing a number." Taylor brought her hands to her mouth. "What number?" 29-11. She repeated it several times before falling asleep again. Taylor didn't respond. She just closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let a silent tear roll down her face. What was supposed to be an individual relief became a collective sign. The psalm had gone beyond the limits of the room. It had crossed walls, cameras, states of consciousness. It was working. It was flowing. And in that moment, as she looked out the hospital window, Taylor whispered to herself, "This was never just about us, was it?" As if heaven heard, the reflection on the glass formed a line of light that cut across the room's floor and touched the foot of her father's bed. It was as if, even in the architecture of the sun, there was divine intention. Taylor closed her eyes once again. "God, if there are still more people to reach with this verse, use me, show me, let me be a bridge, because now I understand." The photo was just the beginning. Some words seem too small for what they carry. Strength, for example. How many times do we say that to someone who is suffering, as if it was simple, as if wishing it were enough? But those who've spent nights in a hospital, those who've seen someone they love among tubes and machines, know that real strength doesn't come from us. It comes from somewhere, invisible, like a breeze that blows where there was no air. And peace, that one is even stranger, because it doesn't look like silence, nor the absence of pain. Sometimes, peace comes even when everything around is falling apart. It doesn't need explanation, only space. Peace, when it's from God, doesn't make sense, but it makes a home. That's why Psalm 29 to 11 touched so many people. Because it doesn't promise ease, it promises presence. It doesn't deny the chaos, it offers something within it. And that, for someone at the bottom of the pit, is worth more than any positive diagnosis. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. This is the phrase that crossed generations in Taylor's family, that was hidden in a lens, engraved on a wall, written in shadows, that passed through the body of an unconscious man and touched others he never even met. This is the promise that became a bridge, and today, now, in this moment, it can become yours too. So, if you are hearing these words and your heart is tired, if someone you love is fighting against illness, against fear, against doubt, or if you just need to remember that there is still an invisible hand holding yours, even when everything seems too dark, close your eyes and pray with me. Prayer based on Psalm 29 to 11. Lord, you are the strength that lifts the weak body. You are the peace that calms the weary soul. Today, I do not pray only for myself. I pray for every name that will be written in the comments below, for every person who will hear these words in the midnight of pain, for every son who prays for his mother, for every grandmother who kneels for her grandchildren. Lord, where medicine cannot reach, may your Spirit arrive. Where hope has dried up, water it with your promise. Where there is a scream, bring relief. Where there is silence, speak. And where there is a heart asking for strength, give it. Where there is someone begging for peace, pour it out. Because your word does not return empty. Because you are the God who turns photographs into miracles, whispers into answers, numbers into direction, and psalms into bridges to healing. Amen. Now it's your turn to be part of this chain if you believe in this prayer. Write in the comments the name of someone who needs strength and peace. Write just a name or a phrase of faith. God knows how to read between the lines. If you want to go further, take a photo of yourself with 29 minutes and 11 seconds written somewhere and post it with faith. This image may reach someone you never imagined, and share this video with someone who needs hope right now. Because the psalm that touched Taylor might touch the next person who opens this video. And if you've made it this far, it's because God is still building something in your story. This was just the first episode. In the next one, you'll find out how a number written on an envelope saved a woman from giving up completely. But for now, breathe, pray, share, and let Psalm 29 to 11 find a home inside you.